Hi, I'm Dawn Westmoreland, coming from Asheville, North Carolina, the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains, coming from WPVM FM 103.7, the voice of Asheville. Every week, I have a guest on, an expert that talks about the workplace. Now, the workplace, we have all kind of things going on right now. We have a lot of stress. We have a lot of people that are uncertain. We lack clarity. We lack happiness. And today, I am bringing on Terry McDougall. Hi, Terry. How are you?
Dawn, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. So yeah, my show is every Thursday, 4:30 p.m. You can dial in if you're in Asheville at WPVM FM 103.7, or you can stream it at WPVMFM.org. And Terry, why is happiness, clarity so important in the workplace? You're the expert on this, and that's why I wanted to talk to you.
That's the $64,000 question, Dawn. It's funny. As an executive and career coach, I work with high achieving people. These are people that are successful. They're doing what it takes to make the big money, to get the big titles, to work for the right companies. And so often, what I find is that they've delayed gratification for so long, and it's gotten them to a level of success that they thought once they got there they'd feel happy. And so often what I find is that people will come to me and say, I thought when I got the VP title, I thought when I was making X amount of dollars that I would be happy, and that's why it was worthwhile to put the time off, or put my satisfaction off. But they get there and they realize, hey, I'm still the same person and I'm not feeling happy. And I really believe that, what's success without that feeling of satisfaction and happiness? And I'm all about helping people to really expand that overlap between professional success. I mean, that's important to me and it always has been, but also that feeling of satisfaction, that feeling that there's a purpose to what we're doing. And so I
Mhm.
help people get clear on that and start to design the roadmap to get there. Um, and I think it's very much needed in the corporate world and every other area of our economy these days.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because people do work hard. Many people are out there trying to earn college degrees, get the acronyms behind their name and such. So let's talk about clarity, because you said earlier that you like to help them with clarity.
hmm
How do you do that?
Well, it's funny because I think sometimes people think that when they hire a coach that I'm going to have like the magic bullet, or I have a magic wand that I can wave and be like, hey, this is the perfect thing for you. But that's not the case. I'm just somebody who is, optimistic. I worked in the corporate world for 30 years, so I actually am coaching people that are a lot like me. I was a high achiever also,
Mhm.
but I'm optimistic and I'm pretty creative at helping people figure this out for themselves. And I completely agree or believe that people have the answer to the question, what do I want to do? What's going to make me happy within themselves? But a lot of times they've sort of lost touch with that. And so I've got a number of different exercises and ways of helping people get back in touch with that. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of I think fears and coping mechanisms that people who are high achievers put in place to keep them focused on grabbing that brass ring. But there are also ways that we can start to remove those obstacles to knowing ourselves better and finding that path that feels right, that feels very authentic.
So Terry, you're a coach. Are you also a consultant?
Yes, I do. As a coach, I tend to work with individuals to help
Mhm.
them, on this path. I work with people to help them be more successful in the workplace, but I also work with people that are in job search, maybe have gotten to a point where they're saying to themselves, should I stay or should I go?
Mhm.
What I find is that as a coach, that about half the time when people learn new skills about how to navigate the workplace, that their level of satisfaction goes up. Because that old adage that we've heard, "What got you here is not going to get you there." A lot of
Mhm.
times people find them in a place and they're like, okay, all the stuff that worked in the past isn't working for me anymore. So I help them learn those skills so that they can keep going forward and feel like, the time and energy they're investing is getting them something back. And then also, um, about half the time people will realize, okay, I'm getting in touch with what I want, and I'm really looking at my work situation clearly and realizing that there's just a mismatch at this point. Like maybe I've outgrown it, maybe the company's going in a different direction. So I'll help them get clear on what they want to do next and design a strategy on how to do that. Now, as a consultant, I help teams to operate more effectively, efficiently, because a
Mhm.
lot of times, there's an old saying like, know yourself to lead yourself. And then when you can lead yourself, you can lead others. And I teach a workshop, which is called the Five Voices, that can help people know themselves better so that when they're interacting with other people, that they can understand that not everybody sees the world the same way that they do. And when
Mhm.
we can start having appreciation and respect for the way that other people operate in the world, it just creates a more efficient and successful team dynamic. So that's the kind of consulting that I do.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Terry, about people seeing things differently, because my understanding from that is we see the same thing, but with different lenses. And I think it's really, really important for the listeners to know. Some of them do not know what a consultant does versus a life coach. And we're both coaches and
Mm-hmm.
life coaches, so we know the difference. Could you give a brief description of what a coach does and then what a consultant does?
Yeah, so a coach it's kind of like what I was saying earlier. Like, I believe that my clients have the answer to their own question. And I'm there to help them sort of dig through, their thoughts and their beliefs and their habits and patterns, and start to recognize like what's serving them and what's not. Get rid of the stuff that's not serving them and really focus in on the things that are going to help them get to their goal. So it's really, I think as a coach, it's really about helping them change mindsets, helping them develop new habits so that, once they're clear on their goal, that they have a roadmap that they can follow to get there. And so, I might point things out to them, but really it's their journey. I'm not coming in and saying, you have to do X, Y, and Z. I'm coming in and saying, okay, if you want to get there, let's look at your current situation and what you'll need to change in order to get there. Versus, and by the way, this as a coach, it's their choice, right? I
Right.
can't come in and say, twist their arm, you have to do it this way. Because what works, kind of going back to what we were just talking about, what works for me or what works for another client may not work for that individual. And I really have to be respectful of that and be curious and help them find their way. Versus a consultant is going to come in, they're going to diagnose the situation, make recommendations about a specific roadmap, and then lead them through that. So it's a little bit subtle in terms of what the differences are, but a consultant typically, has done the same thing for another organization, and they're going to design that roadmap probably a little. There definitely will be some consultation with whoever is leading the project, but I'm going to come in with an answer to the problem typically, and now I'm going to lead them through that.
Thank you for that. And, we have a lot of coaches out there, Terry. You've been at it a while. I've been at it a while. We have a lot of coaches out there. And unfortunately, it's not we don't have to be certified, although, I know we are certified.
Mm-hmm.
But, we've been through a lengthy program and we've worked on ourselves so we can help other people. What does a person look for in a coach? A coach who really knows what they're doing.
Yeah, well, I worked in the corporate world for 30 years. I have an MBA, and when I started considering becoming a coach, I'd actually hired coaches, and so I knew what they did. I knew how much it helped me, and I also liked coaching and mentoring in the workplace. As a leader, I really enjoyed that. So I remember thinking like, I think this would be a good career for me. I'll bet I could hang up a shingle and call myself a coach, but it was really important to me to get certified because when you're coaching, people are really putting their trust in you. And I wanted to make sure that I wasn't, stepping into something that might harm someone, like without even realizing it. And it's so funny when I went through my coaching training program, I realized how naive it would be to step into coaching without the training because there are some, gray areas along the fringes where, coaching touches um, therapy and psychiatry and so forth. And, I'm not, I mean, some coaches are therapists. I'm not. And so I really have to understand where that line is so that I don't cross it. Sometimes you run into situations where people are going to be much better served by a physician or a therapist or some other situation. And so that was really important to me. And I'm sorry if I lost the thread of your question, if I
No,
didn't
I think
answer it.
you did a wonderful job because what you said is basically you want somebody, what I heard you to say is you want somebody, that is trained, knows what they're doing because
Yes.
yeah, it's coaches, sometimes people want a counselor and, if you're not a clinician or, a counselor,
Yes.
something like that, then you may not be the right person. I think you gave a wonderful explanation of that. So everybody loves a story, a good story. Tell me a story about somebody that reached out, for help and how you were able to help them.
Oh my gosh. Okay. There's someone I call Lee. I wrote about her in my book, and I just love this success story. When she and I first started working together, she had been promoted from being a team leader of 8 people to being a departmental leader of 50. And she, I don't know, several months she'd been in the role. And one of the first things that she said to me when we started working together was that she was considering asking her boss to demote her back to her old position. And I thought, oh my gosh, like you work so hard to, get to that level of leadership. And why in the world would you do that? And I asked her, like, why? And she said, oh my gosh, she's married, had 2 children. Um, and she said, I'm working like 70 hours a week and I just
Gosh.
cannot keep up this pace. It's just, on the weekends, I'm taking work home.
Mm.
And I said, please, before you ask your boss to demote you, let's work together for a while. Let's see if we can find some ways to get some relief for you. And I had to get to know her over the course of a few sessions and start to look for what I call the leverage points. And when you're an individual contributor, usually your leverage is 1-to-1, right? It's like you are doing the work. When you move into a team leader role, you can multiply that by the number of people on your team, but even then the leverage could be higher depending on how much you delegate, how well you're using your time, etc. And when she was a team leader of 8, she um, if people were getting behind on work or whatever, she would just jump in and take the
Mhm.
work off their plate just to keep everything moving forward. Well, when she moved into her role as the department leader of 50, she was managing the same way. So she was, somebody needed something, they could walk into her office at any time. She was, going in and filling in spreadsheets. She was answering, she was the Ask Jeeves um, for the department. And
Mhm.
so we just started identifying ways that she could meet the objectives of what she needed to do within the department without her being the one doing it all. And one of the first things that we did was that I got her to agree to close her door 2 hours a day because she said to me, I only can get work. I come in at 7 a.m. and I only really have, can get my own work done between like say 7 and 8:30. And then if I stay late from say 5 to 7. So she, the bulk of the day was just a parade of people coming into her office every day. She felt very nervous about closing her door because she thought people were going to judge her or think something nefarious was going on behind closed doors. I said, listen, just let people know I need to get my own work done. I'm going to close my door for a couple hours. Lo and behold, I mean, just by that one action, what she found was that when she opened her door, fewer people were coming to her to ask questions because, I mean, maybe obvious to us, those of us talking and listening here, but not obvious to her, was that they were finding other ways. They were trying a little harder to solve their own problems. They were going to colleagues and asking the question that before they were coming to the big boss to ask. So that was just one of the things. But there were many other things that we saw, like, for example, she had reports that she needed to give to her boss on a weekly basis. And she was taking all of the formatting on herself. So she'd get reports from all of her direct reports and she would format it. And, these are just little things. This is blocking and tackling. But over time, she was able to recognize more and more of these opportunities where she could delegate, where she was identifying people that actually weren't living up to expectations on the in the department, and maybe demote them from team leader and promote somebody else who was more who didn't need as much of her support, that kind of thing. So over the course of the few months that we worked together, she was able to decrease the number of hours she was working every week from 70 hours to somewhere in the range of 50 hours, just by, respecting and valuing herself, and also recognizing that she had a lot of resources that she was not fully leveraging. She just began, I call it mentally promoting yourself. She had not mentally promoted herself to that next level, and so wasn't using all the resources at her disposal to their full leverage point.
Yeah. That's a wonderful story. I love hearing stories about, people who, are in that position, and who knows, maybe they've not been mentored or, been coached or something to that effect. Now, Terry, you brought up a book. Is this your first book or one of your books?
It's my first book. The book is called Winning the Game of Work: Career Happiness and Success on Your Own Terms.
So tell us a little bit about what's in your book. What would a reader get out of your book?
Well, the reader would get basically it's sort of in book form the journey that I take people through as a coach, which is getting clarity on what their goals are, starting to imagine what the roadmap would be to get from point A to point B. Once you get clear on your goal, okay, well, how do I get there? Identifying skills that you may need to develop. I actually go into a lot of stories and a lot of sort of teaching in the book, based on a lot of the patterns and situations that I see in my coaching, because there are common patterns among people. And, my example with Lee is very common, where high achievers have a very hard time delegating. So just helping them to see, how do you delegate? How do you manage time better, etc. I go into a lot around the environment, or, office politics, because a lot of people will say, I don't want to get involved in politics. Well, politics is the art of influence. And if you work in, actually, if you've got more than two people in an organization, there's going to be a little bit of politics, right? And being able to figure out how to navigate, how to influence within that environment is very important, because otherwise you're just sort of stepping out and saying, oh, well, I'll just let whatever's going to happen. And that can be a recipe for unhappiness, where you get like painted into a corner, right? And then you're like, maybe kind of like my client Lee, oh, I'm just going to get demoted. I'm going to go back to the comfort zone rather than like going forward towards something that maybe is more satisfying. And then finally, and very importantly, the book helps people identify their mindset and shift it to one where they believe that that goal that they've come up with, that clarity, is possible. To me, the three most important things are, what do you want? And believing that what you want is possible, and then taking some action. It doesn't have to be a giant leap. You don't have to jump off the high dive. You can start by putting your pinky toe in the baby end of the pool, but you just have to keep moving forward, and, maybe just edging slightly, bit by bit, outside of your comfort zone. And I've just seen it time and again with clients that once they they'll stay in their comfort zone and tell themselves all these reasons why they shouldn't step out, right? Like, oh, I might get fired. It's never going to happen. They only hire this kind of people, whatever. But once they step out, a lot of times they are rewarded with something that's so much better than they could even imagine. I mean, there's really infinite possibilities in the world. And, once we don't have to, go out naked into the world. We can just, like I said, one little toe outside the comfort zone that just expands it so we can step a little further and a little further out and see what's out there. Because there's
Yeah,
lots of others who, are interested, and maybe they're looking for somebody just like you.
absolutely. So as coaches, we often hear the term, the inner gremlin. That's that
Oh,
voice that
yes.
tells us to stay safe. Let's cover that area because I think it's so important because oftentimes, unless somebody's taught about the inner gremlin or the theory of it, that they may
Yes.
not realize that there's something, an inner dialogue going on that may not be
Yes.
very good for you or healthy.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the concept of the gremlin. And it's that little voice inside of our head that says, oh, well, don't do that because something bad's going to happen.
Hmm.
But until we kind of raise our consciousness, we can believe that that's the truth, that voice we hear is the truth, that we have no choice. People will say things like, no matter how hard I try, I can't change the way I think. And that's not true. We actually have control over the things that we think. We do not have to accept them as truth. And if we start to separate and realize that gremlin is just part of you that is trying to keep you safe, and it's a very sort of, in some ways, immature part of you that only actually cares for nothing except for keeping you safe. It doesn't care if you're happy. It doesn't care if, staying safe is actually dangerous in the long run. It's just, immediately like, I feel uncomfortable, so I'm going to do this thing. And it's really important, I think, to recognize that, like, that's a nervous little,
Hmm.
immature part of yourself, and you can bring in the mature, rational part of yourself to maybe question some of the things that gremlin tells you and say, is that really true? And if you believe that, how is that serving you? Is that going to serve you in the long run? Is that going to help you get the things that you want? um, I also think that that gremlin, this is based on things that we've experienced starting in infancy, right?
Hmm.
And so maybe some of the things that the gremlin tells us were true once in our life. Maybe when you were, you know, 3 years old, if you didn't finish your lunch, you weren't going to get a cookie after lunch, right? And so you might be telling yourself base uh, things that once were true in your life. But you're not 3 years old anymore. You're 35, you're 50, whatever. And a lot of the things we fear, it's sort of like in our um, nervous system in a way, right? Like, because it's so early, we learn these things so early, it's like below the level of consciousness that we're still reacting to it. We're still telling ourselves these things when in fact, you might say like, my parents spanked me when I was a little kid. And so I'd be fearful of like, oh, I might get spanked. Guess what? Nobody's spanking me at, 50 plus, right? That's not going to happen to me, right? And so if that's what my fear is, I need to update those thoughts. And that's
Hmm.
up to me to really say, what's that belief that's causing me to feel that way? And ask myself, is that really true? And it's not. So I can update it to something else.
That was very helpful. So, as we start to conclude the interview, tell us about what services you're offering right now. Now, you're doing coaching, consulting, and are you doing training? You're doing
Yeah,
training?
my consulting really is, it's kind of consulting slash training. I do teach workshops. I'm certified in something called the Five Voices, which we mentioned earlier. Just that helps people understand who's around them, like who else is on the team, And if I understand them better, how can we maybe work together better as a team? And the consulting aspect of that really is I've got assessments, but then I actually have workshops that I teach to help, go deeper and embed that in the team. So one-on-one coaching, and the workshops slash consulting.
Okay. And how can our listeners reach out to you if they want to learn more about you or actually hire you for any of your services?
Sure, they can go to my website, terrybmcdougall.com. I'm also active on LinkedIn, and my handle there is Terry B. McDougall. And then finally, if they want to check me out without reaching out directly, they can check out my book, Winning the Game of Work, which is available on Amazon.
Okay, it's on Amazon. That's great. So any kind of projects or goals you're going after from this day on?
Just continuing to try to find those high achievers that want to be happier in their lives. Well, actually, I guess I can talk about I have two podcasts.
Go
Um,
right ahead. We'd love to hear
yeah,
about
one is called Marketing Mambo, which I've had it's coming up on 2 years at the end of this year. I was a marketer in my corporate career, and I still really enjoy talking to marketers. And so my podcast is, I say I chat with marketing movers and shakers from around the globe, just about a lot of different topics. And then I, just a few months ago, started a new podcast called Winning the Game of Work, which where I'm really focusing on topics similar to what you do, Dawn, really about how to be happier and more successful at work. I've got a series that I'm working on with someone, a special series on eradicating workplace bullying and the toxic workplace.
it.
And my partner on that, Lisa Edmondson, actually was bullied and ended up leaving a job. And rather than, kind of skulking off with her tail between her legs, she said, I'm going to do something about this. And so she pulled together experts. So, people who are trying to change the laws, some professors, authors, consultants, to talk about what we can do. Like, why do we see bullying in the workplace, and what can we do to eradicate it? And so I'm the podcaster that she partnered with to address this. So we've got a special series that started earlier, and I still have a few more episodes to put out on that.
Well, thank you, Terry. And, to listeners, reach out to Terry if you're looking for clarity, looking for a life coach that will help you to get there. And if you need any help with consulting training, again, reach out to Terry. And I'd like to say that that's a subject near and dear to my heart, is workplace bullying and discrimination. And it does take a team of people. Not one person can address everything. There's so many aspects that come into it. Sometimes, we need to send somebody or encourage them to go to a mental health professional or counselor. Sometimes they need to see an actual MD, medical doctor, for physical ailments if they're stressed out. And, as Terry, I got Lisa on the brain now. As Terry, I heard a lot of things during our interview, talking about, standing up for yourself, believing in yourself, setting boundaries and things like that. That's all very important. Any last words? We're down to our last minute.
Well, I am all about encouraging people to value themselves. You are worth, you belong here, you're worthy, and you're worthy of being happy. Don't toil away in something just because you're quote unquote successful. You can be successful and happy. So try to find that way.
I love it, Terry. All right. And if you are having any difficulties, I'd like to offer, that you check out my workbook, Stand Up to Workplace Bullying Discrimination. It's the first of its kind. When I had been bullied, I decided, not just to be a survivor, but to be a thriver and get out there like Terry's doing and other people are doing, is to share, what I've been through, but also to show people how to stand up to workplace bullying discrimination, how to be happier, how to have boundaries, and most of all, how to believe in themselves. To everyone out there, stay empowered. We'll see you next time.